God is a creator. She argues if we're creating God's image, the Imago Dei is fulfilled when we exercise our own creativity.
We all love movies, but what if while we've been watching motion pictures, we've been missing the big picture? Let's talk about it with author Crystal Downing on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
Yeah, welcome to the show. This is Steve Brown, etc. I am not Steve Brown. I am Matthew Porter, your humble guest host. Fear not, Dr. Brown will return next week. Yes. Yeah, you know who is here. Jinx, our producer. He is in the little glass booth. Producing. Today we are going to we're going to be talking to a fascinating woman about a fascinating woman. And we're going to be touching on film, on cinema. So that begs the question, Jinx, what is your favorite movie that you could talk about on this family-friendly talk radio show?
Hold on, let me go down to about 25, 26.
Yeah.
Let's see here. No, it has to be Fight Club.
Oh, okay.
Followed by The Matrix.
Classic. Well, yes.
And then you just add Sixth Sense in there and you know who I am.
So 1999, everything just went downhill after that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Very good. Our one-man IT department, John Myers, is in the tech bunker. You don't see him, you don't hear him, but I asked him, what's your favorite film? And he says, Oh Yeller. And he goes, the ending is funnier than you remember. So I'm like, that's
You're going to have to go home and watch it, aren't you?
That's terrible, John. That's not a funny ending to the movie.
He spends too much time in the safe house.
Sounds like a cat person.
Yeah, that's it. That was Dr. George Bingham. He is the president of Key Life. George, any favorite films? Anything?
Wow, I'd have to go way back.
Yes.
To actually, when you had to see it in the theater.
Yes.
And the number of times that I went to the theater to see it.
Okay.
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Classic. William Goldman. That's,
and close behind it would be Jeremiah Johnson.
Okay. All right. I think I've seen your niche there.
Yeah. So no Matrix?
That's good.
Yeah, I like the Matrix.
We don't need no stinking Matrix.
That's right.
And Kathy Wyatt is the soft feminine side of our program. Kathy, any favorites?
I'll give you the classic line and then you'll know.
Okay.
Get off my plane.
North by Northwest.
No.
Air Force One.
Yes, Air Force One. Wolfgang Peterson. Very
I thought
good.
she was going to say you're going to shoot your eye out with that thing.
Oh, that's for Christmas time for sure. Well, let's introduce our character, our star of today's program, Crystal Downing. Dr. Crystal Downing is an award-winning author. In addition to her books, Crystal has published more than 90 essays on topics ranging from deconstruction to the Amish, and her literary analysis appears in 8 critical editions of canonical text. Crystal's new book is called The Wages of Cinema, a Christian aesthetic of film in conversation with Dorothy Sayers. Crystal, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out with us. So we're going to get into the meat of the book, but so just give us a top line view. What is the book about, and why'd you write that?
I wrote the book because I have taught film and have been annoyed about the way many Christians talk about film, in that they reduce film to a content delivery system. In other words, they extract Christian messages out of the film without really valuing the artistry of the film itself. And I thought to put this problem in conversation with the friend of C.S. Lewis, Dorothy Sayers, because she caused one of the biggest religious controversies in 20th century England, because she felt that Christians, especially evangelical Christians, are commit the docetic heresy. Docetism is, it was big in the early church, where Christians argued that Jesus only seemed to be human. So the word comes from dokein, which means to seem. And as Bishop Marcion put it, and he was an earnest follower of Christ, but he says, but the human body is filled with excrement. How could God ever take on a
Fury's
human
filled with
body?
excrement.
And
Wow.
so, yes, Jesus seemed human, but basically, Docetists say that Jesus was God's content delivery system. So, Sayers' problem is that she was asked to put together radio plays on BBC Radio, and because she did not use King James English, Christians all over England, this was 1941, all over England protested her plays. She got hate mail. It was argued in Parliament that these plays have to be taken off the air. And she got threatening phone calls. And these Christians were rising up because there's only, a certain way you
Yes.
can talk about the truth of Christianity. And back in 41, it has to be in King James English. And so this was on the headlines of London newspapers. It said, plays about Jesus. And it said, not only did Sayers use slang for the disciples, and of course the disciples used slang. They were working class. They
Yeah.
used slang.
In other words,
But
Yeah.
worse. Some of it was American slang. So the headline was Plays About Jesus in American Slang. And this was just, censorship committees rose up. I mean, it was just horrible. And she described this as the docetic heresy, where they don't want to think about Jesus and the disciples as real human beings who would use the slang of their own time. So, inspired by that and bothered by Christians not valuing the artistry of film, I brought her in as a conversation partner to talk about the docetic heresy when it comes to the discussion of film.
Wow. Man. And we're going to dive into the nuts and bolts of that. But Sayers, this is an ongoing fascination for you, isn't it? This is not the first time that you have written about her. Introduce us to her a little bit more, because she sounds like a troublemaker.
like her already.
And I like her already.
Yeah, she was pretty feisty, and she had to be. She got one of the highest scholarships ever to Oxford University, did all the same work at Oxford University, and went down in 1915, but she wasn't given a university degree, even though she outperformed most of the males there because Oxford didn't believe women needed degrees. They can go and sit in the classes if they want, and they do all the same work, and they perform, but you don't give degrees to women. So she was in an environment where she really had to be strong in order to affect culture. And she did affect culture. And here is the irony, is that all these Christians who were trying to suppress these BBC radio plays about Jesus and were just writing just horrible things to Sayers, because of that controversy, all these non-Christians listened to the radio plays, assuming that Christians were protesting because Sayers was undermining the idea of the resurrection or the miracles, and she wasn't. She spent a whole year rereading the Gospels in the original Greek in order to really capture what was going on. So after the plays, and she held her ground despite all the hatred from Christians, And because of that, thousands of people tuned into these radio plays, and she got letters. And she wrote this to C.S. Lewis. I have thousands of letters from people who say that because of these radio plays that are written the way people in their day would have talked, they say they've come to the Lord, they've renewed their faith, they've started reading the Bible. She transformed culture because she wasn't going to follow the generic religious standards of her day.
Wow. And just as a way of context, you mentioned Lewis. She was not, correct me here, she was not among the Inklings, but she was Inklings-adjacent. Is that?
Yes. Well, that's because the Inklings didn't include women, once again. But she sent a copy of the radio plays that created such a controversy to Lewis soon after they were published because she really loved Lewis's problem of pain. That just spoke to her. She sent him a copy and he loved it. These radio plays that Christians tried to suppress, C.S. Lewis read every single year for his Easter devotions until he died.
Wow.
So that's 20 years. So when Lewis is writing the Narnia Chronicles, he's getting his nurturing from C.S. Lewis, from
Sayers.
C.S. Lewis is getting his nurture from Dorothy Sayers.
Amazing, amazing stuff. Guys, this is a lady who was ahead of her time. What would she say to us today? That's what we're going to dive into for the rest of the program. We are talking to Crystal Downing, and we will be right back. Thanks for joining us on Steve Brown, etc. We are talking to author Crystal Downing. Her new book is called The Wages of Cinema, A Christian Aesthetic of Film and Conversation with Dorothy L. Sayers. We'll dive back into the conversation, but before we do that, anytime I'm working with creatives, the highest compliment I know to give is when I hear something from somebody and I go, I wish I thought of that. When I hear the title Wages of Cinema, I'm like, dang it. That's so good. Gosh. Crystal.
I know, I had to write the book just so I could use
just
the title.
to use the title. How can we back a book into this title? And it's so apt. So we've been talking about Dorothy L. Sayers. Lee, middle name Lee? Do I remember that? Dorothy
Lee Sayers, yes.
Thanks, Wikipedia. See? Just saved myself a lot of time in school. Just look that up. She is, as we're slowly learning, a fascinating woman. And the book is kind of what her views were on cinema. But correct me, did she write a lot about it? Or you pulled this information from other sources, from Marginalia, blah, blah, blah?
Oh, yes. Good question.
Yeah.
People don't realize Sayers' interest in cinema because when the 4-volume collected letters of Sayers was put together, the editor left out every single letter that praised cinema. Now, I understand why she did that. The editor was born 1915. She was a friend of Sayers, and she wanted to prove that Sayers was this brilliant scholar.
Serious.
But for someone born in 1915, film, that's what the masses go to. And she didn't want people knowing how much Sayers loved film. So I was in the great position of being a director, along with my husband, of the most comprehensive archive in the world for published and unpublished materials by and about Dorothy Sayers. It is called the Wade Center, the Marion E. Wade Center, and it's associated with Wheaton College. And it was started as a focus on published and unpublished materials by and about Lewis, C.S. Lewis. But then the director just started gathering materials by people who influenced Lewis. And Sayers is the only woman included among the 6 authors that influenced C.S. Lewis. And I mentioned one of the ways she influenced him.
Yeah.
So I had access to all these unpublished letters
Wow.
at the archive and discovered not only did she write about cinema, but she would actually draw shots from films to her parents and say how effective that was.
Wow. That is amazing. I have a ton of questions. I'm going to defer, though.
Crystal, one of the things that I found really interesting as part of your book, and Dorothy Sayers, I guess it would be appropriate to say, was kind of at her peak in the transition. Well, I don't know if you call it transition, but the dawn of cinema, and especially some of the transition from theater to cinema. She was interested in both. But as part of that, you go back and provide the background going all the way back to, several hundred years BC or BCE. And it was interesting to me, also you included references biblical references, some of the biblical writers, and I'm thinking of one in particular, Paul, in Athens, I guess, but made reference to the theater of the time, the Greek and Roman theater and so forth. Are there any things that come to mind, particular examples, or that as part of the early background of this topic?
Yes. I felt the importance of discussing the history of theater in this book because theater contributed not only to film, and many stock characters from film come from Greek and Roman theater, but also because theater contributed dramatically to Christianity. So if I'm going to bring film and Christianity together, here is a common ancestor for them both. I taught medieval drama at UCLA, and medieval drama is it's entirely based on Bible stories and saints' plays. And just by teaching the theater, I had students coming to my office saying how they had been transformed by what they were studying in the class. A lot of people don't realize that when Tertullian coined the word Trinity, which of course does not appear in the Bible, but it is a conclusion that early church leaders made about God as 3 in 1, Tertullian used the Latin phrase "un substantia tres persona." And persona was the Latin term for the mask that actors wore in theater. So to understand the very nature of God, he was borrowing from theater. And in Acts, yes, Paul, when he is being questioned by, I forget which leader it was now,
King
he
Agrippa, I
actually
think.
quotes from a famous Greek play. And the Caesar says, "Would you so soon make me into a Christian?" Because fundamental to the very origins of theater is the dying God myth, where Dionysus is killed on an altar and then is assumed to rise again. And it comes from fertility myths. So Greek theater started with rites to Dionysus, and all these singers would be standing around the altar and as putting Dionysus to death and then singing about him coming back to life. Even Euripides' Bacchae is about a god put to death coming back to life. So it makes sense that Paul would be drawing on references to theater. But what makes it very interesting too is how C.S. Lewis came to Christianity is when he discussed how with Tolkien, there's all these dying god myths, Dionysus, Osiris, etc., etc. And Tolkien, plus another professor, made the point that in Christianity, myth became fact.
That's fascinating. We'll pick it up on the other side of the... Sorry, Crystal. That is awesome. Let's continue it on the other side of the break. You're listening to Steve Brown, etc. You are listening to Steve Brown, etc. We are hanging out with author Crystal Downing. Her new book is called The Wages of Cinema, A Christian Aesthetic of Film, and conversation with Dorothy L. Sayers. Crystal, before the break, you were telling us a fascinating conversation, or we're having a fascinating conversation. It involves Sayers and Tolkien and Lewis. Reset that for us, if you would.
Okay. C.S. Lewis, it took him about 13 years to come to faith, and he came to believe that there was a God, but he argued with Tolkien, a fellow professor at Oxford, that there's all these dying God myths and all these religions around the world, so Christianity is just one among many. And Tolkien made the astute observation that, yes, there are numerous dying god myths, as though they were all anticipating the story where myth becomes fact. That it's not just a fiction. We have evidence that a man named Jesus lived and walked the earth, and that this was God incarnate who rose from the dead. And that did it for C.S. Lewis. So I brought it up because the whole dying God myth is what ignited theater, that it was a right to celebrate the death of Dionysus.
The goat song thing. Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's
the goat song, which means tragedy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, when I read that in there, I'm like, oh gosh, you're connecting so many things in an interesting way here that I don't know, just brings kind of a unity to a lot of disparate things that and all of a sudden they just kind of unlock on a different level. Another kind of heady thing you talk about here that's very central to the book, though, the Trinitarian view, Sayers' view of that, and creativity. How does that work? What is that about?
Right. Well, this was key to a book that Sayers wrote called The Mind of the Maker, a book that C.S. Lewis called indispensable. And essentially, she is arguing that in Genesis 1:27, when we are told that humans are created in the image of God, and in Latin, that's the imago Dei, we need to consider the context. So in Genesis 1, what kind of God are we being given in whose image we are made? God there is not a lawgiver. God is not a redeemer. God is a creator. So here she argues that if we're created in God's image, The imago Dei is fulfilled when we exercise our own creativity. And this was radical. She was getting letters from theologians saying nobody has talked this way before. And she originally put it in one of her plays. And theater is important too, because theater is how Dorothy Sayers came back to Christianity. And she realized her view of creativity and the integrity of work was consonant with Christianity, not opposed to Christianity. And that's why she would be so sad at Christians today who don't honor the creativity of film. They just, again, want to extract a message. So if we're created in God's image and we're Christians, we believe God is a Trinity. And therefore, she aligns the Imago Dei with the three aspects of the Trinity. And just as there's Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, she says, well, in our creative process, there is idea, energy, and power. And the three are one in that a creative person, and you don't have to do art to be creative. A creative mother thinks of ways to engage critical thinking in her child rather than just putting him in front of a screen. A creative cook thinks of new ways to cook. Sayers said, whether it's church embroidery or sewage farming, you can be creative. A creative sewage farmer thinks of how do you use the sewage to help fertilize my neighbor's fields, right? So creativity fulfills this Imago Dei. And then part of what I did that nobody has ever done before, because nobody knew that Sayers was interested in film, is show how many film theorists echo this tripartite idea of, or tripartite construct of idea, energy, and power. And we can talk more about that after the commercial break, because it's pretty complicated.
Yeah, excellent. We love it. We are talking to Crystal Downing about her book, The Wages of Cinema, and more specifically about Dorothy Sayers, fascinating woman. And I want you to know, when I found out we were going to do this, I immediately bought the book, The Mind of the Maker, and read the entire book.
Yay.
No, I didn't. But I downloaded the PDF and I read the PDF. No, I intended to read the PDF and I read part of it, but I like the part that I read, so I want partial credit.
The title?
Yes. All right. More when we come back. Stay tuned. Thanks for spending an hour with us here on Steve Brown, Etc. Hey, by the way, if you're on the YouVersion Bible Study app, check out our latest devotional based on Steve's book called No More Mr. Nice Guy. Fun fact, when it was published in England, they renamed it Don't Let Them Sit on You.
I remember that.
And in Ireland, it was called Aye, so it's a Donnybrook you want, is it? That one didn't do very well there, but get all the details at keylife.org/devotional. Before the break, we were talking to Crystal about Dorothy Sayers' Trinitarian view of creativity and how it kind of overlapped with some film theorists' view of the same. Pick that up for us, if you would.
Okay. Well, as I note in the book, Ingmar Bergman, who had a similar background to Sayers in that he was born into a family that where the father was a clergyman, but he gave up his faith. But it's interesting that as he got into filmmaking, he described it as having this tripartite component to it. And so it just resonates perfectly with Sayers. So you have all creativity starts with some kind of idea, but then the next stage is the what she calls energy. And isn't it interesting that when creative writers or painters, whatever, or even cooks, they might say, well, then I had this great idea, but then I had to flesh it out. They use the word flesh, just as
Yes.
Jesus was the enfleshment, the incarnation of God. And then the power is how it affects others. Sayers has a whole chapter called Pentecost in her book, The Mind of the Maker, how the power goes out to others. But first, the initial power goes to the maker in him or herself. I am a writer. I've published hundreds of essays and 6 books. And so I get an idea. I then start fleshing it out. But then I read back what I've done and I go, I really like this part, but this doesn't work. And so that third component, power, actually changes or affects the idea, which then affects how I flesh out that idea. The three are one in the process of creation. So that's how Sayers sees it. But then, as in scripture, the Holy Spirit comes upon Christians at Pentecost and affects them with this truth of what has been enfleshed. So also with film or with any other arts, if it's then you get viewers who then respond to what has been given. And even in filmmaking, the first viewers, especially before digital filmmaking, they would just watch what they called the dailies every day. And so here's the idea, the energy. So the cinematographer is there, the editor is there, the director is there, and then they watch the dailies and they go, that just doesn't work. We need to change things
Yeah.
up. So the three are one in the process of creation. That is Sayers' idea of the Imago Dei.
Wow. That is amazing. Kathy.
Yeah, Crystal, I wanted to, and unfortunately, this hour has gone by so fast. We only have about 3.5 minutes, but I wanted to jump into the 21st century. I wanted you to bring Dorothy Sayers into the 21st century because I'm curious as to what you think, how you think she would feel about the current state of just entertainment in general, but specifically Christian films, which have undergone a significant transformation, like within the last 20 years or so.
Oh, yeah. She just talks several times about seeing a Christian film and just how bad it was. And I think her seeing Christian films may have helped feed this idea of what she calls the integrity of work and the love of the work for both work as a verb and as a noun. So there are just so many bad films out there. And she actually has a section in her book, Mind of the Maker, that she calls Scaling Trinities, where she says bad films, it's usually because they emphasize one of those three components more than another. So idea, the film is just all about ideology and getting this idea across. Or another film, it's just all CGI, chase scenes, blood and gore. It's just all the flesh, many things quite literally,
Right.
and not a single idea about human nature or sociology at all. And others are just intentionally about power over the people. In fact, there's a famous film theory that developed in the 1970s called apparatus theory that basically says that film is just reinforcing capitalist ideology and it doesn't allow people to think freely. So film theory also has addressed these three different components. And I've read every book I can get my hands on written by Christians about film, and just they don't, the vast majority don't deal with film theory at all. And that's like Christians saying, oh yeah, I'm a Christian. Oh, I don't waste my time with theology. I just want to save souls. But theology is about understanding how Jesus functioned as a medium. Film theory is about understanding how film functions as a medium. So there's all these parallels between Christianity and film, and Christians need to be thinking about the medium itself. Stop being docetic and thinking only about the message.
That is such good stuff. And like Kathy said, where did the time go? I've got piles more questions, and we are flat out of time to ask them. But thank you, Crystal, so much for spending time with us, for writing this very thoughtful book. Dorothy Sayers clearly was a prophet in so many different ways, speaking to things that are still relevant today, of Christians who maybe good intention, but kind of shut off parts of their brain that need to be engaged. God made us, gave us an intellectual capacity. We do him or the kingdom no favors by shutting that off for simple sentimentality or easy slogans or whatever. So thank you again for this reminder from Dorothy Sayers. Again, the name of the book is The Wages of Cinema, A Christian Aesthetic of Film and Conversation with Dorothy Sayers. We have one more tiny segment ahead. Please stick around for that. We'll be right back. You are listening to Steve Brown, etc. By the way, if you enjoy this show, you might also like the conversations that we have off air. We do record those.
We do?
Or not.
Yes, for blackmail purposes or whatever. We do a video series called SBE Insider. It's on YouTube, but don't go look for it because you won't find it because it's unlisted. It's only for the people who get our free weekly email. But don't worry, it's easy to get through that gate. Just go to keylife.org/subscribe. We send you one email a week. There's a link every week to access that. I think you'll like it a lot.
The kicker.
That's the kicker. You do have to sign up for a no commitment free email. So
If you don't like it,
that's
we'll give
the
you money
bar
back.
you've got to meet. What'd you guys think about Crystal in the book?
Yeah, fascinating. It was interesting, too, that she mentioned offline that a lot of people may connect to, that Dorothy Sayers is considered, certainly one of the kind of founding inspirational people in classical Christian school movement.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess I had heard that, but it had escaped me. But those concepts of truth, beauty, and goodness, which get brought out so often, the importance of creativity and so forth, she talks about some in the book. So it really was fascinating and impressive of how Dorothy Sayers just kind of got her fingers in so many different areas.
Yeah, and we touched on it a little bit, but there was still more there. She was a playwright. She was a novelist, and not Christian novels. They were like murder mystery stuff, and those got made into films. I mean, this gal was in a lot of different places. So there's a phrase I came across in the book that I guess was like a key phrase for her: "Good work, well done." I'm like, oh, I love that, because now we're beyond just quote unquote arts and creativity. That applies so broadly to, I mean, name it. What do you do? What are you into?
Yeah.
Do good work. And if you do that well, does that not inherently glorify God, even if it doesn't have a little cross stamped on it?
Yeah.
So
Communicating in the medium being the message in part of that, which goes back to the incarnation. And
yeah, good stuff. Well, thanks for hanging out with us for that. Do we have anybody next week, Kathy?
We do next week. This talk about going from one side of the fence to another. Next week we have Michelle Van Loon with us, and her book is titled Downsizing, Letting Go of Evangelicalism's Non-Essentials. That should be interesting.
I like.
Cleaning house.
Less is more. We'll tune in for that one. I'm sure it will be also compelling as this week was. Thanks for hanging out with us. Do hope to see you next week. And until then, be safe, stay dangerous.
You can open the blinds today, too.
Yeah, right?
good show. Good.
Yes, thank you guys.